that is education pe Charcha. This is Vivekananda, an author, academician, and a public intellectual on the platform of Vidyadan. Vidyadan means we are conducting so many programs online, for the entire nation, especially for the students community. My dear viewers, today it is a special program on such an auspicious occasion of the birth anniversary of one of the greatest philosophers ever born in India. That is Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan, India's second, president, and the vice president of India, first vice president, I would say. He became the first vice president in the year 1952 and the first president of India in 1962. Now, it would be very appropriate here to quote a Sanskrit philosophy, because today, since we are going to discuss on such an auspicious occasion, which happens to be the birth anniversary of one of the greatest philosophers of this country, as well as even recognized across the world, it would be very appropriate for me to start, or rather kickstart, this particular spectacular program with this particular quote. That is, prostrating at the lotus feet of all our gurus. I'm not talking about my personal guru, but I'm talking about the gurus of all of us across the world. Because we revere gurus as the manifestation of God. So therefore, Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Deva Maheswara, Guru Sakshat Param Brahma, Tasmai Siri Guru Vai Namaha. This is the stanzas where under, the glorious tribute is being paid to the teaching community. And here it would be very appropriate for me to discern or to dissect between Vidya and Avidya. When we talk about our reverential salutations to our revered teachers, we have to understand, though it is a very subtle concept, but nonetheless, the deciphering of which becomes all the more indispensable. Because, when we talk about Vidya as great monist, the greatest mind ever born in the mortal body, Adi Sankaracharya, spoke about it. He talks about Vidya, which is something which leads the human being towards the realization of the soul. Because when you realize your soul identity, you attain liberation from birth and death. Whereas on the contrary, avidya is all sort of leading us towards ignorance, where under the bondage of the soul with body continues from life to life after life. And to get released from this burden of this body, physical constitution, it is all the more important to have a guru, because guru's jnana, guru's knowledge of Brahma is the sine qua non for attaining liberation from the cycle of birth and death. My dear viewers, today we are talking about great Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan. And when we talk about great Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan, I would like, before I talk about who that great philosopher was, about something about his life, it becomes all the more important to dwell, to dwell, at least not at length, but in just nonetheless, to talk about our Upanishadic character, that is Nachiketa. Because Nachiketa, at such a barely age of 5 years, he could manage to understand the entire universe. He could manage to have the knowledge of Brahma. And I would like to tell you by way of an anecdote as to how Nachiketa, realized the absolute, that is, realized Brahma. And my dear viewers who are not familiar with this proper, with the connotation of this particular terminology, Brahma, I would like to tell you the Brahma means consciousness. That is what Sankara, great Adi Sankara, talks about this world as the manifestation of Brahma, as the manifestation of consciousness. So Nachiketa, barely at the age of 5 years, when his father, Braj Sarva, was a king and he was distributing largesse among the people. So Nachiketa was, even though he was a pretty child, a mere child of 5 years old, but nevertheless he was very much inquisitive. and very much, enlightened. For a boy of 5 years of age to be of that sort of, to be enlightened of that particular level itself is very confounding. So Nachiketa went to his father and said, "Oh, beloved father, you are distributing, donating all cows and all sort of cattle to all these Brahmins. What about me? Why don't you, whom you are donating me to? Because I am your most loved object, most beloved. So whom you are donating me?" So his father ignored him twice. But when Nachiketa insisted upon knowing this for the third time, his father, out of sheer anger, or you can say sheer frustration, said to him, "I am donating you to Lord Yamraj, Lord of Death." Nachiketa, on hearing this particular fact, he left his father's place and went farther and farther. And coming near a pond, he sits in meditation, and his soul gets released from the body, and it comes near to the palace of the Lord of Death. When he reaches at the palace of Lord of Death, that is Yamraja, was not there in his palace. So he waited there for 3 days and 3 nights before Yamraja appeared on spot. See, beholding a young child standing and awaiting him for last 3 days, Yamraja was pretty surprised. And out of extreme surprise, he asked him that who he was and what he was doing there. Then Nachiketa said to him that, "My lord, my beloved father has donated me to you. So I am your slave. I have come to serve you." Hearing such words of wisdom, coming all the way as it did from such a mere small prodigious child, Yamraja was taken aback. He said, "Okay, I'm very pleased with the truthfulness that you have exhibited. Now please tell me, I am ready to grant you 3 boons. So you can seek 3 boons. Tell me one by one what sort of boons you would like to be granted." Then Nachiketa said, "Okay, first boon is that my father had got some sort of bitterness towards me. I seek that, by way of my first boon, that his bitterness should melt away." Yamraja, or the Lord of Death, said, "Okay, granted." By way of second boon, he said that, "Okay, please tell me the mystery behind this yagna, that the sacrifice that to Yamraj, Lord of Death, or Yamrajji, he had granted." By way of third question, coming all the way as it did from such a young child, is itself bewildering. He is asked by way of third boon, "Please tell me the mystery of birth and death. What happens to the soul when it gets released from the body? What is the actual truth behind life and death?" Oh my God, the question coming as it did from such a young child. Even the Lord of Death was really confounded. He was bewildered. He was absolutely taken aback. He tried to cajole that particular child by offering him, "Okay, you are too small to seek answers or clarifications on such a very crucial aspects of this universe. Why don't you ask for 1,000 years of life?" And all these sort of, multiple ways he tried to cajole. But the boy steadfastly stood his ground. "No, I want to know about the mystery of birth and death." Then what Yamrajji said, that is there in Kathopa Upanishad, and it has formed the part and parcel of the story that Swami Vivekananda had narrated to the intelligentsia class of United States of America in course of his visit in the year 1893. That is why I have chosen, because today it is such an auspicious day, the birth anniversary of one of the greatest philosophers. I chose this particular story to be told to my audience, because they should know who Nachiketa was and why Nachiketa is so very important for us. Then the Lord of Death said, "My dear, since you are insisting upon knowing this, I am telling you that there is no death. What people say death, actually it is a mere end of a particular journey. And as we come towards a destination and then we kickstart another journey, the death is something like that. It is only the shedding of the physical carcass, but the soul gets released from there for, and just to begin the further journey. Unless the realization of Brahman comes, unless the soul realizes his actual identity, this journey will continue forever. And this is what, that is the soul, Brahmic Om, the cosmic consciousness, the Brahman, that is the consciousness, that exactly is the soul, that is should attain liberation only when its true knowledge dawns upon a person. So my dear viewers, why I narrated you this very important story, because even I found in schools, while delivering speeches years ago, I found even in DAB schools, the children were absolutely unaware of who Nachiketa is or who Nachiketa was. I was absolutely taken aback seeing the stark ignorance of the students community, because we don't know who Nachiketa is. And that is why when new education policy was on the anvil and I was invited by RSS for a particular brainstorming session, I had suggested that Nachiketa chapter should be included as a part and parcel of the syllabus. Now, this is a philosophical truth which Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan upheld as the supreme truth. The philosophy of non-dualism that comes from Upanishad, which was interpreted by great Adi Shankaracharya in his own non-dualistic philosophy, which was endorsed and subscribed by great Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan, that became all the more important for me to tell you today on such an auspicious occasion about this particular concept of Nachiketa and about the Brahma, that is the consciousness. My dear viewers, one more small story I would say, what is the role of a guru? It is very, very important. This story, I think, is important because we should know the role of actual perfect guru. They know Angulimal was a big dacoit and he was, killing the people. He was on a killing spree, killing one after another another person. So when Buddha was walking through the forest, Angulimal said to him, "Thehar ja, stop there." Buddha did not heed it. Second time Angulimal said, "Thehar ja." Buddha still did not heed. Third time he said, "Thehar ja." Buddha did not look back but said, "Bats, मैं तो बहुत पहले ही ठहर गया, तुम कब ठहरोगे?" Son, long back I stopped. But when will you stop? That means I gave up all my desires long ago, but when you will give up your desire, you are killing human beings. And Angulimal was taken aback. Never ever did anyone dare to tell him what Buddha was telling him. He prostrated at the lotus feet of Buddha, and Buddha gave him, he gave him his sermon and he initiated him. And same Angulimal, at the fag end of his life, when he went to village for collecting alms, people identified him and they were beating him with sticks. Brutally, he was injured and somehow he managed to come to Buddha. Buddha just asked him one question. Angulimal, when those people were brutally assaulting you, what was your reaction? Buddha said, Angulimal said, "My Lord, I was not having any bitterness in my mind. I was throughout when I was being brutally assaulted, I only perceived my own fault. And I thought that what I was getting was overdue for me." Buddha said, "You are a soul." He died and Buddha said, Angulimal was a great soul. That is the job of a guru. That even a dacoit, a murderer who had murdered 1,000 people, Buddha, by the grace of Buddha, he attained liberation. This is the Guru Sishya Parampara. And that is why Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan, we are talking about, is known for, because he was the man who upheld the traditional values of Guru and Sishya Parampara. So by giving these two important examples, or exemplification of these two notable incidents, I try to impress upon all my viewers about these two prominent incidents, where under I try, the concept of Guru Sishya Parampara has so lucidly devolved upon upon the Sishyas and Gurus. And this is what great Radhakrishnan, upheld throughout his teaching career, even during, his president's tenure, vice president's tenure, he upheld those values. Now it is a time, my dear viewers, tell you something about great Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan. Now, Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan became the second president of India in the year 1962. He was the vice president of India in 1952. 62, he became the president, second president after Dr. Rajendra Prasad, and he was the vice president in the year 1952. And many of you might not be knowing, which I'm going to tell you just now. 16 times he was nominated for Nobel Prize in literature, but he was denied. And 11 times he was nominated for Nobel Peace Prize. Unfortunately, that too didn't come his way. In the year 1948, Radhakrishnan was elected as the chairman of UNESCO's executive board. His works include, very, very important, his works include Gautama the Buddha. That's why I quoted the instance, Gautama about Buddha and Angulimal, because he wrote very, very important book, Gautama the Buddha. That's why this incident I quoted, just to link the book, great book that he had authored. And his first book was Rabindranath Tagore, Philosophy of Rabindranath Tagore. I will tell you a little later about this particular book, which is a very important incident. Next one is the, Rabindranath Tagore, his first book, Reign of Religion in Contemporary Philosophy, among others. He wrote all these very famous books. Oxford University started the Radhakrishnan, the Chevening Scholarship and Radhakrishnan Memorial Award. Since 1962, Teachers' Day in India is being celebrated on 5th of September every year to pay tribute to Dr. Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan. He accepted only rupees 2,500. At that point in time, the remuneration for the President of India within, in Indian Republic was rupees 10,000. But the great man accepted only 2,500 by way of his remuneration, and he would donate 7,500 to Prime Minister's National Relief Fund. Now, these were a few things. Now we are coming to very, very important. We said, all that about Radhakrishnan. One more incident I would like to say before I am going to introduce today's very, very distinguished, our honored guest. One more incident from Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan's book, that is The Philosophy of Rabindranath Tagore. It is very, very important here because the first book he wrote needs to have, be explained a bit. Rabindranath Tagore's concept of nationalism was universal. Tagore never agreed on principle to consider Indian, in the sense of Indianness as the holistic concept of nationalism, because his nationalism was universal. And in 1938, this is an incident which is told to me or narrated to me by Dr. Amit Mitra, who is the incumbent finance minister of West Bengal and one of India's topmost economists, also the principal director general of FICCI. Dr. Amit Mitra was the FICCI. Dr. Amit Mitra Sahib, a very world-renowned economist, had personally told me this incident. In 1938, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose and Rabindranath Tagore, Gurudev Tagore, both of them had a meeting in Kolkata, that is erstwhile Calcutta, in a place called Mahajati Sadan, where Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose and Tagore both had some sort of debate and brainstorming session, because Tagore never considered India in itself as the nationalism, because his nationalism was universal. He considered entire world to be one, as per the universal concept of Adi Shankaracharya. But Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose tried to impress upon him the sense of Indian nationalism, which was very, very important in view of India's subjugation, for colonial subjugation for centuries together. So the discussion took place in Mahajati Sadan between two great stalwarts of that particular time. So this is very, very important. I needed to tell you, my dear viewers, about Tagore's overall universality when it comes to nationalism. But then Netaji tried to impress upon him that how for a subjugated race or a nation, independence was a sine qua non. And that was the nationalism in its own holistic and comprehensive form. This was a very, very important point. Now today, my dear viewers, now it is a very, very appropriate time to introduce. It is our great privilege, a bestowal of divine grace, that we have albeit for the first time, an honorable lady gracing and blessing our education pe Charcha, a really educationist of highest stature, of a distinctive category. Madam Mrs. Nina Khanna, Dr. Nina Khanna, she herself is a versatility in her, versatility personifying in an individual manifestation. She has been holding an experience of 37 years in the field of teaching, culminating in that of vice principalship of an army school in Udhampur. And with so many schools, she had been teaching. She had been obtaining all sort of experience. She is a doctorate in disaster management, having worked with different top-class organizations, even with Gujarat, in the capacity of an expert in the field of disaster management. She has published so many important articles to her credit on earthquake in Sikkim and so many other on very important, delicate issues confronting the Republic almost, intermittently. So, that is why I said, my dear viewers, the versatility manifesting in individuality, that is what Madam Nina Khanna is all about. See, today we are very honored, as I already said with you, my dear viewers, and those who have been watching our program with religious devotion. I would like to inform you that it is a pleasure and privilege to host one of the most distinguished honorable lady with an erudition, so much erudition to boast about, to showcase. So it is indeed a great pleasure for all of us to host Madam Dr. Srimati Nina Khanna ji, who is having a lot of military experience. So she is going to share with us all sort of her versatile experience in dealing with army schools, in dealing with army families, especially when armies, the corpses come from the battleground. What is their reaction? How she has handled those delicate situations. All that we are going to learn from an expert, from the honorable woman who handled it with so much efficiency. That is her charisma. That is her overall speciality. That is what she will be unfolding, the treasure trove of all that sort of expertise or acumen that she personifies or epitomizes, to all our viewers. Madam Nina Khanna ji, Madam Srimati Nina Khanna ji, Madam, we really welcome you with so much, gratitude that you dared or you bothered to give your invaluable time for illuminating our program. So, is it fine, Madam? Am I audible to you?
Yes, you are definitely audible.
So, Madam, now, since I've given your introduction, now the questions will start because, you have so much experience and this is a special show on Teachers' Day. So we are very glad that you have come to, bless all of us. So, Madam, first question I would like to ask you, kindly share your vast and rich experience of 37 years of teaching at different schools, culminating in your principalship of Army School at Udhampur. So please, your take on this, Madam. Let our viewers know about you. Madam Dr. Srimati Nina Khanna ji. Madam, please.
Very good evening to you. Namaskar. It's actually very delightful to hear Vivekanand Jhaji giving us all enriched experiences and the history behind many things. It's really a pleasure hearing you, Mr. Vivekanand Jha. I actually thought that I was here to interview you instead. Yeah, here, well, I have you have described me enough. And a person like me really doesn't need any description. I'm a very simple and humble person. This is one of the qualities that I possess. And being a teacher, I love life. I love life to the extreme because it makes me feel young, it makes me feel happy. And when you're with children, you definitely never grow. That is the advantage of being with children right around. A teacher who loves children also loves learning. And I fall into this category. I love learning all the time. And it's not only teaching that I've done. To the world, you may just be a teacher, but to your students, you are a hero. They worship you, and I have a good example. My girls, my last teaching was with the Convent of Jesus and Mary. And I would like to begin with the last because I taught there for very long. And the subjects that I did were quite different because if I tell you, I've done so much, but in this school, I came and enjoyed. Why? Because I not only pursued my passion along with the girls, I did art and craft for a change, which one subject I had with my graduation, that was fine arts, and it took me to the end where I could really enjoy. And I was so fortunate that the nuns, I worked in all three sections of the Jesus and Mary, right from class 2 to 12. And when it was farewell time to me, after 23 years that I worked in the same institution, it was a farewell, not a farewell. It was 5 farewells from the same school. It was a junior school farewell. It was a middle school farewell. It was a senior school farewell. I was a PTA member too. And it was a farewell from the nuns. So that's how I ended my career from school. But I really haven't ended my career because I'm into the field of disaster management. I begun my career, and you will be very surprised here because a person like me could refuse a very high ranked JOC's wife. She rang me up and I began after my beard. I had my children. I gave time to my children. I wasn't working. I studied after I got married because it was only, I had done my class 12, you may say, inter, that to first year. And after that, I started studying. And I owe a lot of thanks to my husband here because he supported me a lot. And he let me do what I want. And what is more important for a life partner who lets you do what you want. So here, I owe a lot of thanks to him. And I owe a lot of thanks to Army. I don't come from an army background. And thus, what happened was that I got a lot of opportunities to learn. Every station that I went, I've had my arms full of learning. Moved on to the next station, not that I forgot anybody, but we just kept moving from one station to the other. And in my first station, when my GOC's wife rang me up home, she wanted me for an ad hoc appointment to teach class 4 and all subjects. And guess what? A person like me said, I'm very sorry, I cannot come. I told my husband and he says, my God, you had the guts to refuse a GOC's wife. I said, yes. He says, why did you do that? I said, I gave her the reason because she asked me. I gave her the reason that, yes, my child is very small. She asked, how old is your child? I said, 2.5. And I cannot leave him behind. So my husband just kept quiet. She rang me up again 2 days later. She says, will it be possible for you to bring your child along? I said, where is he going to sit? That's the army school. That first thing, where is he going to sit? She says, look here, there were 2 schools, a road in between. This had till class 5, from class 1 to 5, and that was a pre-nursery. She said, he will sit with me. So my younger son, Amit, would sit in her lap and play and come back in her car back. That's how I began my career. And after that, there was no looking back because each station that my husband went to, either it was my children getting their first into the same school or me getting into the school. So that's how it was. And that's how life moved with us. And I literally saw my children grow because we were almost in the same school right through, which is very, very fortunate. And here I'd like to say again that when my grandson was growing up, I was working for the convent of Jesus and Mary, and when my grandson was growing up, of course, now he's in Australia, he was in Columbus. And St. Columbus and CGM are just a church in between, so you could walk through. So it used to be, people used to think probably I got married late, though I used to carry my grandson along. So that's how it was. And my experience of teaching has been varied right from KG class to college level. Because wherever I got an opportunity, whatever I could, I did. And not only did, I enjoyed it very much. And best part is, whenever I haven't changed much, that's what my students tell me. So even if students meet me after, I'm not connected much on the Facebook and things like that. But when students meet me after about 8 years, 10 years, and the last one that I met was after 13 years, she also recognized me. And since I told you my last option that I did, these girls have taken off so well into artistic, talented careers. And the last one that I met just before the pandemic was a girl. I'd gone to a wedding, and she best part was she was the wedding planner there. And she comes up to me and tells me, "Ma'am, I'm here because of you." What else credit does one need in life? I don't think one needs anything else if students can run up to you and tell you this. I met one in Australia. Like that, all over the world, I have had a good opportunity to travel. And wherever I've gone, it's so strange. I do bump in, or the students do bump in and recognize me. So it's a lovely feel that, yes, you're there very much with them. Now, army schools, I come up to your point here, and I worked enough for the YWCA too. And YWCA was all textile designing that I did, and home management, and teaching English to foreign students. I worked for the central school too, and in Udhampur, where I was the honorary principal, it was nice, great fun, because each and everything that I took up and said was always accepted. And it was so gracefully accepted that if I wanted to change even the furniture or the dresses or the syllabus in the curriculum or add some newness to it, it was always welcomed. There was no stopping. And I have been very lucky because of my senior women, senior ladies, who've been actually very fond of me. So that was always one of the added advantages in life that I ever got. Now, when we come up to army schools and private schools are almost, army public schools and private schools are almost the same. They have the CBSE curriculum. And why were they set up? Why were these set up was that when the armed force children move on, they normally do not, admissions have always been a problem. Not now, even when many years back, even 40 years back, 30 years back, to get into small, good schools, it used to be very difficult. So that's why in 1974, we had these army schools which came up, and they were to impart education to the children. And these were very conveniently done. Why? Because, whenever the father was posted to another station, even mid-session, the family could move along. This was the greatest advantage. And this has been, we have in India, there are about 130 schools, 137 schools in India, one of the largest chain of schools in India. And this is controlled by the Army Welfare Education Society. We also have 249 pre-primary schools, and 95% are armed forces children in these schools, and 5% are where they have the quota. And these quota children are where their parents, either of their parent is paid by the defense. We have Sainik schools too, and there are 29 of them. We have Rashtriya military schools are only for armed force children. The first was established in 1925. That is how old our military army school was. It was known as King George's Royal Military Academy at Chahel. There are 5 of them. One is at Chahel, Simla, Ajmer, Rajasthan, Dholpur, Rajasthan, Belgaum, Karnataka, and Bangalore, which is also in Karnataka. Earlier, it was only for boys, but now they have started making it for girls. They're offering it to the girls also, these sailing schools, because by and large, when we talk about women, uh, there are some aspects now, like that you've seen the Olympic Games, how many have won the medals too, and come up in various sports field. So here also they want some, a gender, they don't want to make it so gender biased. That's why I suppose they have wanted girls also to join. And earlier girls used to only join the armed forces as nurses and maybe doctors. Now they are coming into other streams too. And here it becomes really essential that they get this background, that they get this discipline right from the beginning onwards. Uh, these schools are basically preparing children to join the NDA, that is National Defense Academy. And they have these entrance exams from 6th and also 9th. They have 10 tough, and this is a very tough entrance exam that they have. And they have a quota for service persons, state domiciled students, open quota that is for SC and ST. The quota limit of classes is 6 to 10 years. 6 for class 6, it becomes 10 to 12 years. And for class 9, it is 13 to 15 years. So they have these 2 categories where these children can join it. They also have, they have to pass a medical test, because medical becomes very, very important. And as you know, in the army, everything rests on the medical of a person here. The difference here between an army school, people normally confuse an army public school and a Kendra Vidyalaya, right? Here I'd like to highlight everybody that we have these Kendra Vidyalayas. All central government employees, children get admission there in the Kendra Vidyalayas. While his army public school doesn't have price of this. Yeah. And in army public school, it's only the armed forces children. That is the army. When you talk about armed forces, it's the army, navy, and air force. So these are the elite branch that they get. And all these who are paid from the defense budget, as I mentioned out. Now, not only school level, we see our children rising above this also. And when we talk about children rising above this, naturally they will need higher education. So here the army caters not only for that, but for higher education also, these children have to sit for competitions. It's not that easy that you are a general's son that you get your admission in. You have to sit for a competition. And for higher education here, we have these, like we have the Army Institute Technology at Pune, which is for engineering, right? So our product children go to engineering colleges. We have the Army Institute of Law, which is in Mohali and Pune. There is not a single line that I can tell you which is not there, which is not chosen by the army for their children or armed forces, which they haven't catered for. They have the Army College of Dental Sciences, which is in Secunderabad. They have an Army Institute of Education also at Noida. There's an Army Institute of Management and Technology, which is again in Noida. Army Institute of Fashion and Designing, which is in Bangalore, and Army College of Nursing, which is in Jalandhar and Guwahati. So we start from the medical and the technology. Here they have the Army Medical Sciences, which is in Delhi Cant. This is a long list which enables our children not only to reach one level of school, not only to reach that part, but also get their higher education so that they can fit globally. And it so happens that our children who are from this background, I'm very proud to say that, because I would say a touch wood, Deepak and Amit, my 2 sons, are also doing well. And not only that, the friends that we have, the children are all doing well. And the stress behind them is not much. It's very strange. The stress that I've given them is not much, because I've always believed in one thing, that everybody's children will do well, and so will mine do. So this is my upbringing to my children, whether it is my home or whether it is my workplace. I always give that leverage to any part of the child that he is going to do very well in life. Right? That's it for me for this question that you have told me.
Thanks a lot, madam. You have elaborated on all these about the different types of institute which are catering to the requirements of the children of the military or the army, navy, as well as air force. Of course, at the higher education level, they do have a special provision for all their children. It is absolutely marvelous information that you shared with all our viewers, because many of us basically are unaware of all the names of the institutes that you just mentioned. I am sure many of us will be benefiting from it. Madam, I'm coming to a very important question now. In 1987, your husband's unit had gone to Sri Lanka to tame the LTT. Because if you can recall, and if our viewers, especially to my viewers, if you people, or if you all can recall, in during Rajiv Gandhi's regime, Rajiv Gandhi, the capacity of the Prime Minister of India, had entered into an agreement with his counterpart of Sri Lanka, where under Indian forces were sent to Sri Lanka for taming LTT, the LTT militants, who of course, they had their ancestry from India, but that is a different question. So basically, now again, I'm coming to the question. I just had furnished this piece of information to my viewers for the clarity to dawn upon them, especially in the context of the question which I'm just going to ask to our honorable guest, honorable Madam Mrs. Khanna, Srimati Khanna. Madam, this is there. So Sri Lanka to tame the LTT, leaving behind in Kanpur 187 families of officers and Jawans. The unit was deputed for Operation Pavan for 14 months. 35 Jawans, including 2 officers, died and scores were injured. How did you manage the situation unfolding on the home front? Because it should have been all crying, all sort of such a excruciating pain that military, the wives and mothers and sisters would have undergone in that situation. What sort of technique you applied to calm them, to restore normalcy in them? Please, madam, your take on this.
Yeah. Before I come to your question and answer your question, Mr. Vivekanand Chaji, I would like to tell the listeners that I go a step further to relate what happens to the other families, right? Who are left in constant fear when their fathers and husbands go fighting on the front, right? I must confess that's only after October 2017 that I could relate to you about a 1987 war. Here is a point to really understand. So calmly, I speak before you here and remember incidents because our husbands took us in 2017 back to Sri Lanka. And to pay homage to the departed, as Sri Lankan government had built a war memorial in Colombo in their memory. And of IPKF persons who laid down their lives fighting the LTT. We read each and every brave, I call them brave hearts, each and every brave heart's name and said an individual prayer for each one of them. Otherwise, even after 30 years, I would have goosebumps. मेरे सारे रोंगटे खड़े हो जाते. जब भी 30 साल में, जब भी whenever I would talk about Sri Lanka, believe me or not, my arms would, all my hair would stand. And it's only after we prayed and we went to the war memorial that I became normal and I can speak normally. And the month was, now I'd come up to the 1987, October. You know, it's very strange. When you make your house, you have one housewarming party. And that's the end of it. But in army, it's not like that. We might change 3 houses in the same station, but we'll have three housewarming parties. That's the fun we have. That's the togetherness that we share with each other. Being away from our home, because those are your family, the ones that you live with. There was a little nip in the air. October used to be not so warm as it is now with global warming. So in 87 it was a little chilly in the air. And the families here, our officers' families were all in my house. We were all sharing my housewarming party. And we saw them all together. Here, I would say the families do not fight with rifles, the women, or the families do not fight with rifles like their better halves on the front, but they suffer enormity of nearly dying every day till their life partner does not return back, while still carrying out the routine duties with a smile on their faces. I consider them to be fighters as well, maybe a little more than the men, because they are an inspiration to their husbands and their children too. This is the life that a woman in the army leads. We see so much of glamour around her, but the truth is this that I come up with. It's a tradition in the army that the officer's wife, the CO's wife, the commanding officer, and his wife are both called old man. The commanding officer is known as the old man, and his wife is known as the Mataji. Right? That's the type of regard we get from all of them. And it so happened, like I mentioned, it was the news broke down in my house. It was a meeting that he had to attend at 11 o'clock in the night. Our buddy, that's the Sahayik that we had, he came and told him, Sahib, Sab, phone aa raha hai, brigade headquarters ja. So he went and he told everybody, yeah, you continue with the party, I'm just coming. But he came back only after 1.5 hour. And that 1.5 hour for us was like, sure, what's happening? Why is he not coming back? It was suspense time that you can call. And my husband's meeting. Now, what happens is when he comes back, he tells everybody, he breaks the news that we have to go to Sri Lanka and we are leaving in the morning. And so, the action of all the officers, my God, it's like I cannot forget. 87 has been such a long time, but these memories stay long with you. And they started feeling like heroes. All the officers are there, they are already feeling like heroes, eager to face the enemy and also win the war. And they come up with this thing as they came up with such funny anecdotes. Lanka जाएंगे, पंखा लाएंगे. राम गया था उधर, राम जीत के आया था, लंका जाके हम भी जीत के आएंगे. They were trying to cheer us women up. And of course, we had, it was a feeling where we couldn't express ourselves also because we were all together and we were still anxious not to let them know also. Because it often happens that in this situation, you are bothered about what he has to take and what you have to pack with him, rather than what are you going to manage on your home front, because he is the main priority for you in your life. So he left, and 10 officers' families. He left behind not only his wife and 2 children behind, but he also left, like you mentioned out, 187 war families, the other ranks we call them, and 10 officers' families. Those days where letter writing and telephone was only there. There was no mobile in 87, right? No internet, no WhatsApp, no Facebook. So this is what was there only with us. I didn't inform even my mother. We didn't inform anybody even at home because we didn't want anybody to get disturbed. No one, believe me, it is so strange. No one wanted to leave Kanpur. 187 families and nobody is wanting to leave that Kanpur. Even on children's vacations, they're not ready to leave. That was one of the situations. And didn't know, this actually now, when I talk about letter writing, And here I would like to say that when it's always a saying that when you need something, right? When you need to learn something and you actually need it, you start learning it better and quicker. So this is exactly what happened here. In those days, our Jawan's wives, they were not so well read. Now, when you look at them, and you can't even distinguish that these are our Jawan's wives or officers' wives because they're so well read. And those days they were not, and they didn't know how to read. Most of them did not know how to read and write, and so I managed to get help from the state. I was very lucky, like I mentioned out, that the senior ladies have always been very kind. So, and we had a good rapport. We had the station commander and the brigade commander both there, and they helped us. And we got some help from the state, and then my officers' wives were too good. It is like one family, holding yourself, each other, and always there with each other. And it was like, they also instructed them, and then the teachers who had come, they also instructed them, and we got many of them who started writing actually, and who started writing letters to their husbands. So it was like one big achievement for me to happen. For me, it was like growing up overnight. This is the type of feel that I got because I was actually mothering everybody. I started feeling feeling very responsible all of a sudden, not only to my two children, Deepak and Amit, that's their names. The first news came within a week. Terrible. One officer and 18 other ranks were killed, and 3 officers and 36 were injured. And it was shocking, as out of 10, only 6 officers were left. And here, everybody was thinking, what next? Who next? I hope it's not my man. And everybody, we were praying hard that they would turn back. Fear was unknown to anybody. The names of martyrs were not known immediately. We just knew that this is the number, but names were not there. So the anxiety and fear in each family, we just wanted to hug each other and console each other and just be with each other as far as possible. Those days, like now we have the body bags where the bodies come back, but in those days there were no body bags, and they were all cremated at the Pearl Island itself. Only ashes were brought back by a JSO, that's a junior command officer, and the names of martyrs arrived. Guess what? On Diwali day. That is the day when the names arrived. And you had to have actually a lot of courage to go and inform the wife. And here I must say that my officers' ladies were too good actually. Here I must confess that not only I was brave enough, but my officers' wives were even braver. And by turn, they would accompany me. And they would accompany me to perform the last rites in the mandir. And then we would ask, where do you want the ashes to go? We had the Ganga there. You take them to the mandir, or you want to carry them back to your family, back home to the parents. It was a task where I cannot describe this task because my heart really cries. My school job was a consolation. And why? Because even the principal and the vice principal there understood my plight because ours was the only battalion which had left from there. And since it was the only battalion which had left from there, they could understand my plight. And what I used to do was I used to arrange my periods in such a way, adjust them so that in the break, I used to be driving the scooter that time, the Vespa scooter. And I was quite mobile. And the whole place was in the cantonment itself. The school was in the cantonment. The family quarters were in the cantonment. And I would go there. The ladies were not working. They would join me themselves there. And that's how they would take out their charpais, their chairs. And we were like one big family sitting together and listening to their grievances. And most of the time, what did they want? They wanted to hear their husband. They wanted to hear the husband's voice, and especially the injured ones. We managed at times with great difficulty. Communication was very bad that time. It was very difficult. And best when tomorrow, the worst is when tomorrow is so uncertain, your stress levels are so high at times. You really don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Some health issues also cropped up with me. And it was, but a brave soldier's wife tries to put up a brave front always. My children's education got affected. I must tell you this year. Many a times I could not concentrate and give them that much time that I would have loved to give them. But God has His own ways to balance everything in life. That's what I look forward to. Looking at my children were the oldest there. Looking after children who are young here was another very great task. The older children here in the JCO's quarters, that is the Jawan's quarters, my children amongst the officers were the biggest, oldest. But the Jawan's families also had older children. And there they needed help for their studies too, because their fathers were also away. So here we arranged for tuitions from other battalions they would come. My little children would help me in their own little ways. It's very sweet to remember. Organizing plays, football matches, and getting audiences to watch them. So lovely were Deepak and Amit. Gestures. So beautiful were the children's gestures. For the families of the families of ORs, we wanted to keep them very busy and away from the Rona Dona, like you had mentioned out. We didn't want this spirit to happen ever. So for the families, we held number of shows and competitions, right? To keep them busy. We had got a whole lot of, clay. We got a lot of clay from the riverbed. And once we asked them to make a lot, mold them into toys and all, give them a competition on this. And they used to grow some vegetables in their kitchen garden. So we had kitchen garden, best home kept. They would know Mem Saab, that's what they would call me, Mem Saab aa rahi hai. So ghar saaf rakhna hai, cheezein saaf rakhni hai, aas-paas saaf rakhna hai. So we had competitions for that also. And then we had aloo, potatoes is one thing which is eaten all over. So we had cooking potato dish competition and music, dance, bhajan competitions. We had lots of, and then we had bhajans where all used to get together. Now army life is such, that our officers' wives, they knew a number of things. And now I started telling them, now look here, you also give your expertise to these ladies, right? These competitions are not enough, but you also start giving your expertise. And then we had Mrs. Dish who did tie and dye. And then we had another lady who did making flowers with them. Another lady who did making some dishes with them. Another lady who telling them about nail care. Whatever you can think, or hair care, whatever you can think of feminine happening was all there with us ladies. And we shared each and everything with them. Thank God media was not there, right? We had some incidents also, and they were quite disturbing. Like, our families were there, and all the time it's not Kushi time or times like this. We had other battalions, and some of the corrupt men, they came knocking on their doors at night. And this was little frightening, because if your man is not there and you hear knocks on your door, it is terrible. So I started telling them, live together, dande saath rakha karo, right? Not only that, I went and complained to the station headquarters and brigade commander. Of course, my scooter was there with me, so I could move. And their gates were always open for this madam. No permission required, nothing. I could just walk in, talk to their wives, and tell them this is my problem, and this is it. Or to the man if he's there at home, or take a I had a phone, all right. We would get that satellite phone, like you could say. So I would ring them up and take an appointment at times, and they, very generously would assist me. And now what happened was another problem arrived. The money became less, finances became less, the pay wasn't coming here, right? And then there was no ration. And then again, the station headquarters people, what did they would send a whole truck full of fruits and vegetables, dry rations, where our 187 families could take in how much they wanted and sustain themselves. These are very, very difficult things. When I talk about it, when I was really going through it, it was like every day, kuch na kuch, every day, something or the other, new thing is cropping up. Now I think of all these times, how times have changed now. After effects of now, again, I come up to the last bit of it. After effects of the op oven. My husband comes back now after 14 months. And before that, the battalion was tipped to come. And somehow or the other, it got delayed. Now, that was one of the periods, where we women got actually fed up. And we said, let's become news reporters. One or two become news reporters and go to Sri Lanka, go and find out why the battalion hasn't come. That was our gesture. But fortunately, when we were planning and thinking, it started coming back. They started coming back now together. And when my husband came, believe me, he was a commanding officer. And if a commanding officer's feet and his nails are all blue and black, and he hasn't removed his shoes for days together, what would be the plight of our Jawans? Terrible. When they came back, they were looking more Sri Lankans than our men because they had all become so tanned with their skins. But everything gets back to normal with time, right? But this man would get up in the night so many times and remember all those who were martyred. And he would, hear those gunshots. I actually had to do a lot of consoling for him. And not only that, for me also myself, that look here, you're back to normal. That phase is over. That phase is over. And it's unbelievable. When we went back to Sri Lanka for the war memorial, this man of mine dreams in the night. Whole night he was restless. He dreams that all those who had passed away came to him and thanked him and also came back with problems. That's the type of, attachment that you have. It's a soul attachment that you get. And after the battalion came back, one thing is there, I must confess and tell you, that these army men fight fiercelessly. Why do they do this fiercelessly? Because they know the families that they have left behind will not be unattended. They will be looked after. Even if the man goes, even the dependent mother will be looked after. The wife, the children, their education, everything will be taken care of. So my husband, when he came back, he wrote to the chief minister from wherever the martyrs belonged, asking three things. One, he asked for a house for the family in their hometown. Second, a land for their survival and their sustainability. And third, a small memorial within the village where the Jawan came from to motivate future generation. I'm glad to mention that the states responded positively on these, and the procedure became a standing procedure later for all times to come. We call these martyred, the wives who are there, we call them Veer Naris. That is the name we give them because the men who were Veer, who had passed away. So these are the Veer Naris. And even after they pass away, they are invited to all the functions of the 5 Rajputana rifles. That's where my husband belongs to. And not only that, when the veterans, we have these veterans, my husband's a veteran now. So whenever the veterans get together and organize, we call them again. So they most willingly come. That is my take on this. Yes.
Okay, so great, madam. Actually, when you are narrating us with all sort of clarity and in such a comprehensive details, rivulet of tears, had started flowing from my eyes, and of course, many of the viewers who might be listening with a rapt attention because the experience which you yourself underwent, that you are sharing with all of us, first-hand experience, and how Jawans, are protecting us from foreign conquest, from foreign invasion. If we are at peace, it's all because of our sentry who are guarding us and who are stationed at our border, and Indian peacekeeping force where your honorable husband was a part of. and you so meticulously took care of all those Jawans' family when they went to fight on the, for India to Sri Lanka. Really remark my salutations, to you, and as well as my glowing tributes to all those martyrs who laid down their lives at the altar of Bharat Mata. Madam, we are coming to a very next important question, that why, basically, what is the difference between army handling of disasters and civil forces, and why army is called often whenever there is some sort of disaster, natural disaster? Why, the civilians government often, unable to control or contain or arrest the cascading crisis, they usually look upon military or the army to bail them out of the predicament. What is the reason, the specific reason for that? Your say on this, madam, please.
Armed forces, like I mentioned, consists of the Army, Navy, and Air Force. This is a secondary role which is assigned to the Army for disasters. Their first role is, of course, war, right? And when it comes to mitigating disasters, Army men are trained for seeing the unforeseen, because in war also they have unforeseen. They cannot see it. And here we can equate it to a disaster, because in the disaster also you cannot see it. Right? What is going to happen next? It's an earthquake. This is it. It's a tsunami. It's a fire. But what reactions are going to happen? These people they jump into it. They have not only that, they have the equipment, right? And are disciplined. They are loyal to their duty, to the core of their hearts. Armed forces have taken part in major disasters, like you mentioned now, since independence. It's not now that you see them, but since independence. Whether it's a Bhuj earthquake, Orissa super cyclone, Kosi floods in Bihar, or frequent floods in Assam, armed forces have been of help even in small disasters. Like, I hope everybody remembers that taking a child who had fallen into a bore well. There also the army came and helped and assisted. Army is involved in search and rescue, and just after rescue, they mitigate the disaster. After the disaster happens, they just mitigate the disaster. And not only that, they also have, the army is involved in mitigate disasters, stabilize the situation, and hand over to the civil administration, right? So I have an example here to quote. Back in 1982, how did the army really come into this picture was, in 1982, this was an incident in Jalandhar, when my husband was posted to the 5 Rajputana Rifles here. It was peacetime. But then the battalions, whenever they are in peace area also, they are given responsibility of helping civil authorities in case of disaster. The battalion was given the area of Kullu, right? Now they are posted there in Jalandhar, but they are given the area of Kullu. So the CO met the DC. So he goes, and that's the commanding officer. He went to meet the DC, who was happy he was very happy that, yes, the army person has come to meet me and see me. He's delegated. And when they asked him then the CO, the commanding officer asked, do you have a disaster management plan? He's asking the DC, do you have a disaster, the civil authorities here? I will compare it. He says, yes, we have it, but it is a top secret. That's way back in 1982. Yes, it's a top secret document. And when he was asked to show it, very reluctantly, he brought it out. And what happened was, it was a very thin file that he took out. This was nicely sealed and everything. And when the seal was opened, it had just one paper. And the one paper which read was, in case of a disaster, call army. That was written on the paper, way back in 1982. Now we've gone a long way, and we have a specialized force. Everybody knows about the specialized force, which is the NDRF, and which helps in managing disasters to its aid. That's it that I can tell you about this. And army, they are always called for it.
Okay. Thank you, madam. Thanks a lot for shedding light on this very important issue, because often we see as and when there is some sort of crisis, disaster, we instantly see the army is being deployed. So just, deploying army, even at a mere drop of hat, is not good for the governance. We need to have a civilian disaster management in its place, so that we don't overuse army.
I want to say here something here. The state has the state disaster management authority. Okay, we have these. They also come in, they also pitch in, but major disasters cannot be handled. They definitely need outside support, and that's where the army comes in and pitches in. It is not the first hand. First, it's the community which helps in, the people who live around. Then it's the state authorities which come in. And then when it becomes actually a disaster, it's not, we call it a disaster, but earthquake is not a disaster. It's a hazard.
Okay. Thank you, madam. Actually, you published an article on earthquake disaster of Sikkim. Yeah. So what the article was all about? Could you please throw some light on it, madam?
It's long since I've written the article, right? But yes, definitely, I can remember just few abstracts of the article, right? And when I talk about Hindu, whenever there is a disaster happening in the hills, right? It's one of the most toughest and the most difficult ones. Why? Because the hilly terrain is such that it becomes impossible for people to reach and give them immediate relief, rescue them, especially for people who come from outside. Because they will not even know which way they are. And here, when you quote about Sikkim, I would like to tell you about Jammu and Kashmir also. Right? So this becomes one of the major issues, which becomes whenever there is a disaster happening there in the hills. That's it.
So, madam, actually, our time is getting exhausted. I'll just ask you a last question, madam. And for your answer, you were nominated by Pidilite Paint Company to train on handmade craft to the prison inmates of Tihar jail in October 2008. Could you share your experience with our viewers pertaining to your prison, sharing your expertise, acumen with the prisoners in Tihar jail? Please, madam, yourself.
Oh, when I was nominated for this, I cannot tell you, it came as a shock, a real shock. Why? Because I wasn't actually mentally prepared. I'd never seen actually a criminal, believe me. Never seen a criminal. Because those days, I don't think I used to watch so much of news of seeing so many criminals also. So the idea of being, going to the jail was not very pleasant. But then I'm one of those, like I mentioned, always wanting to learn something new, always wanting to do something new. And it's that state which is there with me now also, which happens. And here I was nominated by my school principal, who said, and took me off. These nuns are very stingy. Huh? They do not give you even one day's holiday, right? But here, Sister Matilda was there and she let me go. She says, the company has nominated you and it is a pleasure for us. I was nominated even for the Orissa floods by the school to go and help them there. And it was one of those unforgettable experience that I had in Tihar jail. Why? Because I taught the women inmates, and teaching the women inmates is something very different. Why? Because you have to have that type of bonding first with them. That you come for a purpose here, right? And that when that bonding starts, and it doesn't take me long to bond with. I'm lucky. It doesn't take me long to bond with anybody. Why? Because the person automatically, I say, even patthar bhi hota na, wo bhi, if it's quiet now with me, I think it will also start opening the mouth. So it didn't take me long, right, to get into them and know them. I got into the little of their personal life, They felt, Didi aayi hai, Didi aayi hai main sikhane ke liye, That is the type of feeling that I got. And they learned how to make flowers from me. They learned how to weave mats with me. Every day was a new object. And, we actually sold those in the end, right? And they had a little sale of them. And this was and when I was to go, I did tell them on the last day, I took something for them, right? I took sweets for them. nothing much, but I asked the jail inmate, can I get some sweets, just one sweet for everybody. Not actually allowed to eat anything from outside, but I suppose seeing my sweetness, he says, get along, right? So I gave sweets to everybody, and it was a farewell time. Then they said, Didi, aap kab वापस आओगे? Aap kab वापस आओगे? So I still remember that part of my life. And social work, like I told you, has been right from the beginning since I got married. So that social work comes into you, and that of knowing people, being with them, is actually one of those most pleasurable experiences that I've shared. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, madam. And our viewers, you have heard today, it was a special program, Education Pe Charcha, and we have invited such an erudite, distinguished academician, educationist. And, she has been sharing with all of us her first-hand experience, especially coming from family background, the way she narrated her own tale of sorrow, her own tale of, distress. You can, of course, it is something coming all the way from the aggrieved person, though, and she has been sharing her own experience, is something spectacular, something really unique. My dear viewers, I would just like to conclude with one small incident, because when I was in my sophomoric days, I had studied a very important poem. I have forgotten the name of the poet who had penned those beautiful, memorable stanzas, because I still remember, despite the passage of decades about the stanzas, the name, the very nomenclature, the name of the poetry or the poem was Send Off. It was the send off, given to all the military people, army men, and who were going to, undisclosed destination. So all their family members had come to see them off, on railway station. And the poet describes in such a sensitive, delicate way that, many of them, those who are going today on the war front, they might not return. And those few of them who might return, some, they would just while relate to anyone, because that is a spectacular way of describing the sentiments, the emotions of that of the family members of the soldiers who were going to fight the battle. Today, our honorable madam, our revered madam, with all sort of distinction, of being an academician, the former principal of an army school, and with versatility, the sort of ordeal by fire that she had herself undergone, the way she so candidly articulated, of course, might have brought tears in all the viewers' eyes, because this is only for the army that we are safe and secure. So definitely, madam, with folded hands, I respectfully bow to you, because you illuminated our proceeding and you shared your first-hand experience with all our viewers on this special show of Education Pe Charcha, from the Vidyadan platform, by Vivekananda, author, academician, and public intellectual. I would like to make another very important announcement before we call it a day, and before I so reluctantly bid goodbye to our honored guest with a means a renewal of my offer that once again someday we will definitely call her for sharing her so many questions with her other perspectives. We have on our coming Saturday, 11th of September, a very, very distinguished guest, that is Honorable Education Secretary of Bihar, Sri Sanjay Kumarji, is a senior IS officer, Education Secretary of Government of Bihar. He is going to be a distinguished guest for our Education Pe Charcha. So with this announcement, my dear viewers, today it has been a great, a very auspicious occasion of Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan. As great a figure he was, our honorable madam, our honored guest, in a very corresponding measure, she has illuminated our Education Pe Charcha in almost in the same fashion as we expected. My dear viewers, Swami Vivekananda had said, he had defined education as the manifestation of perfection already within man. That is what Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan too visualized in his own comprehensive manner. And that is what Madam, in her own, in a very lucid style, she tried to share her own experience that is corroborating, the fact that how army, the children of army men are being educated in such a stressful situation. When their parents have gone to fight war, when there is no certainty as to whether they will at all come back or not, in the midst of such enveloping darkness, in the midst of such enveloping uncertainties, the children study, the children look into the future with sense of optimism. Hats off to such children, hats off to them, because Madam says her children today, they are well placed, in their own lives. And they too had to pass through such great predicament in their lives. That is a glowing tribute to the army men, because if they are there stationed on the border, we feel secure, we enjoy, we lead our delightful lives only because they are there as our sentries. So hats off to the army men. We all salute them on this such an auspicious occasion of great philosopher's birth anniversary, Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan, on 5th of September. Every year we celebrate. From Vidyadan platform, I bow to Honorable Madam once again before I return all of you back with a commitment to come back on Saturday again on 11th of September with another distinguished guest, Sri Sanjay Kumarji, the incumbent Education Secretary of the Government of